Okay, welcome to a special episode of Into the Channel, podcast primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Comments, ratings, reviews, always appreciated at ITC_pod on X. I am your host, Dino DeCespedes, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. Champions League is back. So you know what? We're switching up our formation. Grant, I love you, buddy, but we needed another attacker up front. So you already know what time it is. Had to call it our guy, Liga F, Champions League, FA Cup. Doesn't matter. If our guy's on the call, you already know he's going to be ready, and he's going to bring it. One of the voices for DAZN's UEFA Women's Champions League coverage, the one and only Killer Cam, Mr. Camp Hope. Thank you for joining us.
What an introduction once again. Thank you very much, guys. It's a pleasure to be back. It's an exciting time of the season as well. Quarterfinal week. Here we go. So, for 3 of the matches, I'm going to be a very interested fan. Of one of them, I'm going to be the commentator. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
That's awesome. And we're very much looking forward to talking to you about it. But I have to throw folks a disclaimer here. Although this is primarily a podcast about women's football, I saw some things on Twitter yesterday. And so, Cam, I have a quick question for you. You watch any interesting football matches yesterday?
You could say. So I was in a very privileged position yesterday of being at Old Trafford for Manchester United against Liverpool. And so it's such a historic fixture, probably the biggest fixture in English football, men's or women's. And it was incredible. So I live in Manchester, in walking distance of Old Trafford, and I'm very lucky to have just started working with MUTV, Manchester United's in-house television company. And I found out on Wednesday this week that I was going to be doing the game against Liverpool in the FA Cup. So a massive deal, and that was quite lucky because I didn't have too long to overthink it and get nervous. My first sort of TV job for Manchester United, and it just turned out to be probably the greatest FA Cup tie in living memory. It was sensational. It was 4-3 after extra time. Manchester United equalised late in normal time. Won it right at the end of extras, saved the horror of penalties. It had everything, it had atmosphere, it had great goals, it had a red card. Oh, it was brilliant. And I think today I had a big bill of things I was going to work through namely for Champions League prep, and half of them just didn't happen because I feel still buzzing from yesterday. It's still sinking in.
What a time. Obviously historic fixture, but let's get to the real football. We were obviously over the moon when we found out you were calling Barcelona Brann. If you can, take us through those first few minutes after you found out that was going to be your quarterfinals assignment.
It's just getting any game is huge because I got to do a quarterfinal last season on my first season of women's football, and that was a big honour. I did the second leg of Arsenal against Bayern Munich and PSG against Wolfsburg. That was probably until very recently, being yesterday, the biggest game that I've one-off game I've covered. I think it's been eclipsed now. But so to find out that you never take anything for granted, and it's been a good season work-wise. But there are some good commentators on DAZN, and somebody has to miss out. So it was great to know that I got not just any game, but a really good game in Barcelona against one of the headline acts of the competition, the holders as well, against a team that are very close to your two hearts. And so really I was, and also it's how I pay my bills, my commentating. So I was very relieved that I was going to be paying my rent for another month, which is probably the biggest, that was my biggest, my biggest emotion. But so for the first leg, I am going to be on the world feed. So I'm guessing you guys normally watch on DAZN. So you won't actually hear me on the first leg. I'll go out to different partners. So I know in the UK it's TNT Sports. Not sure who it might be elsewhere. I think that beIN Sports might have it. They did last year. Don't quote me on that one. But the second leg, I will be on DAZN. Just the way it works out, we have 2 commentators on each match, essentially. So obviously, I think as commentators, we always kind of hope that there's something on the second leg because 1, it's just easier to commentate on, and 2, just from a neutral perspective. But it's my job to call it whichever way I see it across the breadth of results. It could be a very one-sided win. It could be all to play for. It could be a brilliant cracker of a game. It could be a fizzler into nothing. You just don't know. But 2 weeks ago, I was on an AFC Cup game, a men's game between a team from Chinese Taipei and a team from Kyrgyzstan. So already quite difficult. Made more difficult by the fact it was 5-0 at the halfway stage. So I have had preparation for a game that was all but wrapped up after 90 minutes. But it would be nice for the commentator, for the viewers, for everyone interested in women's football, if the ties were all well poised, as I believe they were last year, if my memory serves me correctly. But no, very excited to be doing the favourites, I think we can say, to hold their title, and a team who are playing completely without fear and who I haven't had the joy of covering yet.
Speaking of Barcelona, their form the past few weeks, let's just say, looked pretty impressive. I think the last 2 Liga F matches, they're up 14-1, if memory serves on those two. I know you called one of those matches, the match versus Real Sociedad. Can you tell us how you've kind of experienced Barcelona's form in the last few weeks?
So I think we should say that results can be misleading. I've seen the highlights this morning of the game against Tenerife that they won yesterday, and they did look very dominant in that one. You have to say they looked excellent. As you said, Grant, I covered the 7-1 win away at Real Sociedad. However, they weren't playing a full-strength Real Sociedad side. It was a very youthful team. If my memory serves me correctly, I think 8 of the starting 11 were aged 22 or under, I think I said on my commentary, because Barcelona and Real Sociedad had the Copa del Reina semi-final second leg just 3 or 4 days later. Now, Barcelona had won theirs 3-0 against Athletic Club, went on to reach the final. Real Sociedad were level after theirs against Atletico de Madrid, and so they decided to play a weakened side, or so it seemed, to keep players fresh. So they left 4 of their best players on the bench. It works. They're going to play Barcelona again in the Copa del Rey final, but they did get an absolute pasting and were 7-0 down at one point. They did get a goal in the end for Amayor Sariegi, but before that, an absolute masterclass at times. However, it does come with a big asterisk to say that it wasn't against a full-strength side. Although, still unbeaten. They've dropped points twice against Levante in the league, one of the better sides in League IFA, and against Benfica, which nobody was expecting, not least the commentator me, 4-4 in the final match day. It was crazy, just before we spoke last. But yeah, they're really struggling with injuries this season, Barcelona. I think we've seen a mortal side to them that maybe wasn't there in previous seasons, or not till the very end of last season, actually. So the defence has been really hampered. Mapi Leon, Jana Fernandez, she's had no little injuries this season. Then they've had to throw players like Ingrid Engen at centre-back, who I think has done really well to adapt to a new position. Marta Torrejon has spent a lot of time playing at centre-half. Martina Fernandez, who's a young player from the B team, has come in and done a good job as well. So I think I read a comment actually on one of the commentary videos saying that our defence is held together by ambition and dreams at the moment, and that's about it. And maybe a bit of tape for the knees, because they've been so unlucky in that area of the pitch. So there are weak points in this Barcelona team, but going forward, ridiculous. I mean, you look at the season that Carolina Graham Hansen is having. I think this is her best season, to be quite honest. You look at Aitana Bonmatí, a Ballon d'Or winner, as we well know, and she's worth every part of that trophy. She's deserving of that accolade in every game she plays, and so it seems. She's still got a rate of scoring at every other game. She's played 30, she's scored 15. And then you look at the main woman, who's Salma Pariuelo, who I think is probably the top player in Europe at the moment.
So you walked us right into it, Cam. I mean, her performance against Real Sociedad, scores in the 24th, nearly scores in the 41st, hits about as great of a free kick as you can hit for the hat trick in the 44th, and then gets her 4th at 51. So I'm just going to, in my professional journalism hat, how can Brann or any team slow her down?
Well, it's difficult. You can't slow her down. I mean, the girl was the under-18 Spanish hurdles champion, and I think maybe the 600 meters champion or 400 meters champion. She is rapid, but she's so good with the ball at her feet as well. You can't slow her down. It's just you have to try and stop the service to her, I think, is the way. And it's so difficult. And even from a dead ball situation, I think Mapi Leon is a brilliant free kick taker. She's out of the team, and Salma Pariuelo has stepped up. She hit that well. Clipped it right off the top of the bar, off the underside of the bar. But, she could have had more. She ran the show, really. She absolutely ran it. So yeah, that she is the main threat, whether wide or whether she wants to come through the middle. Yeah, good luck whoever is facing her. It's going to be a really unenviable task, but we have seen that, her threat has been neutralized at times. If you allow her space to run, though, and if you allow her to get in behind, then that's always going to be a problem because not only can she finish, she can set up as well.
Yeah, I thought what Levante did to Pariolo specifically, letting her get the ball with her back to the goal and essentially taking away the run, just kind of like sinking back defensively, kind of took away her greatest strength. Thought that was an interesting piece. But I did want to rewind really quickly to Barcelona defensively. You kind of alluded to some of the injury issues, some of the personnel issues, trying to sort of make it work, patch it up back there. You've been watching this team pretty closely. Barcelona defensively, what kind of state are they in, like right now, this week, going into this match on Wednesday?
Well, a clean sheet helped, didn't it, against Tenerife? 7 goals, no reply. That's always pretty good. And a disclaimer for this one, because I've had 2 games this weekend. There was a Premier League match, men's game on Saturday, Burnley against Brentford. It was a cracker. And then, obviously, Manchester United, Liverpool, as we covered. So only on my first day of what will be 2 days of prep. And so tomorrow is going to be spent breaking down the team news. I'm covering most of my Barcelona prep. I focused more on Brann today because I have more work to do on them. So I haven't properly got down to the nitty gritty of the Barcelona team news. They've had some recent returnees in Alexia Putellas and Fridolina Rolfer, who both now scored on their returns too. However, at the back, Mapi Leon has been the long-term absentee. There's no way that you can say without her that the defence is in the strongest shape that it can be. And I think there have been frailties. I mean, conceding 4 against Benfica was crazy. It's the like of never before seen performance. So really, I think it's hard to say that they're in a bad shape given that they've kept a clean sheet again. But that defence isn't the defence it was last season. They have struggled losing so many senior players. So maybe there is a weakness there. We have seen them letting goals, but then you look at Athletic Club. Okay, they got one in the second leg, but that didn't help them in the first. They were beaten with a clean sheet there. Same befell Atletico de Madrid before that, and now Tenerife have gone the same way.
Yeah, you mentioned like Martina Fernandez, 19-year-old player that they're kind of cycling in here. You think about Barcelona and their wealth of talent, and now these injuries have kind of chipped away at that. When you see that team sheet before you're calling one of their matches, are there any like lineup choices, maybe aside from injury substitutes, but some lineup choices that you see and think, okay, maybe they're playing more out wide here, or like, do any of their lineup choices kind of tip you off as to what kind of Barcelona you're going to see that day?
I think there hasn't been as much variation as maybe earlier in the season. That's something that we can say. It's been pretty set with a back 4. I like to look out for where Claudia Pina is. I think that tells you a lot because sometimes you look at Barcelona and they've got 5 attackers on. Sometimes the midfield will have 2. You might see Aitana Bonmatí in like the number 9 role. And Claudia Pina can play across the midfield. She can play anywhere across the front. I think she's one of the most underrated players in that team. She's played basically every game this season as well. She's the name I kind of look out for, and I try to piece it around her because certain players, where they're going to be starting. Kira Walsh's position doesn't really change that much, that kind of thing. Vicky Lopez is another one that you can see further forward or in midfield. That kind of gives me a clue sometimes to work out the way that Barcelona might be playing. There have been very few times where I've looked and I've thought, okay, I've got no idea on this team now. But it happened a couple of times last term when they had Anna Maria Tsernogorcevic, who could play anywhere down that left-hand side. And so you had to kind of work around that. But one thing that I found really interesting, and I think has been the biggest change-up, maybe other than perhaps Engen, is Esme Brooks, who joined as a winger from PSV and then has had to fill in. Obviously, Alexia Putellas has been out for so much time. They needed more presence through the middle, and she's done a really good job of adapting to that kind of centre-forward role. The goals weren't flowing in the way that maybe they were for someone like Aziza Oshuala last season, but they're starting to come now. She's looking much more at home. And so that's where I look out for, really. I like to see what shape they're going to go for at the start. But their approach normally is pretty the same. When you're that kind of level, we see it from Manchester City in the men's game. They can afford to play their way every time. It's up to other teams kind of to figure them out.
One last quick follow-up question on Barcelona. So we obviously lost our minds a little bit when we saw the Benfica draw, and then we deep dove on the Levante draw a couple weeks later. We sort of had some fun with the thought exercise that when you have that much talent on one side, and I think we really kind of zoomed into one moment one Kira Walsh moment where she gets a strike at like the 50th minute. And in my notes, I jot down, I bet that's the last time Kira Walsh touches the ball anywhere, anywhere in a dangerous kind of area. It does seem like in tight games, there is a lack of opportunity to get into a rhythm offensively. Like when you think about like how an Oshwala plays, she gets chances, or it feels like you get a Pariuelo game and she's just cooking. She's in rhythm. You want to feed her, and she's sort of calibrating. Even on her misses, she's sort of getting closer to her makes, right? But I think sometimes when the game is close, like what we saw against Levante, there is a sort of like, all right, well, what's our go-to here? Like, do we just kind of knock it around until, and then there's a lot of strikes from a little bit farther. You can kind of push them farther out. So is there a little bit of risk with this team where you could see something like that maybe possibly derailing them?
Do you know, I think that's actually a really good point that you made, Dino. And I wonder whether it's because they've lost experienced players like Sena Gset going, like Mapi Leon being out of the team, to name two examples. I think there are times, and I particularly noticed it in the Benfica game, where they're looking around as if there isn't really a plan B, or they're not quite sure. Especially those games where they've made a great number of changes. Those are the ones where they look a little bit lost, okay? And you might have swapped someone like Mapileon out for the teenage Martina Fernandez, that kind of thing. Not fair to put that on her. She's, I think, performed very well. But sometimes you need your leaders to look to. And that has proved difficult for them. So I don't think they are as good as we saw them last year. And I also think that the gap has closed. We saw that at the World Cup. I think we've seen that across the board. We've seen it with Benfica getting so far. We've seen it with Brann getting so far. So I don't think they can be complacent. I think that is the biggest danger to them now. However, what might hurt Brann is the fact that these warnings have already come. These warning shots have already been fired. I think that maybe it'll work the other way, and Brann can be energized by the fact that Benfica played so well against them. And I'm going to lean into it and say that I don't think they fear anybody now, Brann, as we will discuss. But Barcelona getting that scare against Benfica, they know now that if they take their foot off the gas, so to speak, they know that they can get hurt. Levante gave them a real test, and I think that will have hurt Jonathan Heraldes, because he'll have really wanted to win every game. He said as much, actually, in one of his pre-match press conferences. This is his last season before he goes to the NWSL. He wanted to go out with sparks, and that's not going to happen in quite the same way. I wouldn't bet against them going unbeaten for the whole season. If a loss comes, I think it has to be in the Champions League, to be quite honest. And so, yeah, I think that they do have defeats in them, Barcelona. Do I see them losing to anybody over two legs? No. I think that their biggest... where they could freeze could be the final, like we nearly saw before that Rilfer masterclass in Eindhoven. But no, they are certainly fallible.
All right, so we appreciate the Barcelona perspective. You knew what you were getting into when you came onto this podcast. We appreciate you still showing up. Well, I think Dino and I can safely say we're members of the Brann Battalion. So for all our Brann heads out there who watch the show and might be watching some of those international broadcasts that Cam is on, be easy on our guy. Make sure you enjoy. You mentioned, Cam, you are knee deep in your research right now. You've been looking at Brann today. Over the course of that research, has anything jumped out to you?
I think the whole narrative of the story, the way that this has befallen the club, having never played in a competition proper, had that one stab at it last season, unsuccessful, to win 4 games before getting to the group stage, and to be where they are now, I think it's nothing short of incredible. And I like how stories of them in the English language media have grown and grown. I've been basically translating from Norwegian. Not myself, Google's been doing it for me, but I've been doing that to get news on them, because I like to read local news. It gives you quite a good flavour. But there's been some stuff in the English press too, obviously about Martin Hall and his connections to Manchester United, etc. And a lot of the articles that came out were released in the group stage times, when it was already being toasted and celebrated the fact that they were the team with the smallest coefficient in the second round, and then getting into the group stage. No one seemed to entertain the prospect they could go further. This was all before that point against Lyon. So for them to be there now, and I don't want to patronise them because they're there on merit just like everybody else is. They're not expected to go further. I think we can say that. There's no reason why they can't. But to get where they have got, I think it's a sign that the gap is closing, and that the big powers, the WSL, League IFA, are doing have to be careful, because Brann and Benfica, and to an extent Ajax too, are flying the flag for those smaller leagues. So that's the main thing that I've looked at. And the second thing is the passion. Because I also look back at the highlights of previous games to get an idea of what teams are about and what to expect. And I just hope that that's not hampered by the change of stadium for this game. I think that it's a pity when teams aren't able to play in front of in a facility that they're used to at their spiritual home. Okay, that happens, and that's the way it is. But I think it's a brilliant story. It sets up the narrative nicely going into this one, and I think they're a perfect kind of antidote for Barcelona, who have swept apart everybody else, and it brings the different kind of romance to the game.
I found it very interesting. This match is closing out the Wednesday slate, 4 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. local time, obviously in Bergen, near freezing temperatures, some potential snow, some potential rain. What kind of chances Barcelona have to even make any kind of impact in this match? Or is this just going to be a 2 or 3 goal win for Brann? And,
Well, I think it's handy. It's handy that Brann will be playing at home first. Okay, they might say that it's a shame they won't be. It's a shame that they won't be on their normal patch. Maybe the fact that it's artificial surface at the Åsane Arena. I hope I'm saying that right. I haven't done my pronunciation work yet, so I apologise profusely to any Norwegians who are thinking this mad Englishman. So this game is going to be played on artificial turf. However, Barcelona do play on artificial turf at selected grounds around Liga FA, so it's not a completely foreign surface to them. They don't normally play in Bergen, however, so that is their arsenal. One of my favourite stories from football was how well that Bolivian teams used to do in the Copa Libertadores, because teams weren't used to going to La Paz and playing at about 17 million feet in the air. And so you've got to use your natural advantage. So if Brann can keep themselves within a goal, I think that's a very, very positive result. And it's certainly possible because Barcelona don't always turn up the way that you expect them to. We saw that Lyon had troubles in the same neck of the woods. But I think we can't get ahead of ourselves. We have to be realistic in the fact that, look, the odds are still massively weighted against them.
That's totally fair. We do not expect you to get ahead of yourself. I think Dino and I, we may be past the point of no return, but I want to ask a follow-up to that follow-up when we talk about the teams. Again, I'm going to give you another artfully written question here. Sena Gset, am I right?
I can't believe how young she is. That's the thing that stands out to me the most. 18 years old. It's crazy. And that's my favourite kind of goal as well, by the way, the one that she scored against Lyon. If you could have painted, because I remember where I was when that goal went in. I think that was the day where Slavia Praha were due to play St. Pölten in the game that got postponed. And so I was in the studio because I had to wait for the all clear to go. So I was watching in the studio the feed of the other game. And all the technicians we were all sat around watching it, couldn't believe our eyes. It was incredible. And if you could have scripted how Brann would get level in such a game, I think you would have. It was like a cartoon strip, all the bodies piling in, and it falls to Gset and then rifles it home. It was a bit of magic, and it was the perfect kind of ending to that game. Whatever happens going forward, they'll always have that moment. And I'm glad for them because I thought that after the red card, they reacted way better. Not sure about the red card still, and it made things difficult for Lyon. Let's be true to that. But they had the game in their hands, Lyon, there. Without the red card, they still should have wrapped it up. So I think, that's going to be the crowning moment of this Champions League, unless they can go and top it now. But I don't think it's just about Gset as well, because I think there are other players that could come to the fore in this one.
Yeah.
Aurora Mikkelsen is going to have work to do, whatever way we look at it. She's got a good CV behind her. Was it Manchester United, wasn't she? Yes. So that she needs to be on form if she's the one trying to keep out the likes of Selma Pariuelo, Aitana Bonmati, Carolina Graham-Hansen. I think she is going to have a big part to play. And again, I must qualify that if I embarrass myself here by going into waxing lyrical about a player who's going to miss the game because they're injured and I haven't checked the team news yet, then I do apologise. But this is what I will spend 8 hours doing tomorrow, sat in this seat. But another player I think I've got my eye on for this one is going to be Marit Bratberg-Lund. Because everybody forgets the sidekick, okay? And Sena Gset doesn't score that goal. if it isn't swung in so beautifully by Marit Bratberg-Lund from the corner, okay? How often do we see those big deliveries go wrong in crucial moments? I think set plays could be really interesting. So if Marit Bratberg-Lund is going to be on them again, that could be the way. It's going to be the type of game where they have to take their chances. They absolutely have to take their chances. There was a moment in the Supercopa final against Levante, which Barcelona went on to win 7-0. It was 0-0 at the time, and I think it was Gemma Font who was in net for Barcelona that day. It was when Sandra Panos was injured, and she very nearly gets caught out in the 18-yard box. I think it was by Natasha Andonova, and it's Engen who gets back and clears the ball off the line. If Levante take that chance and go 1-0 up in the Super Cup, maybe we start to see a bit of a Barcelona implosion. Maybe they don't. Maybe they go and win 5-1. But that's the kind of thing that you can't risk against Barcelona. That's what Benfica did absolutely right. They took their chances when they were 2-0 down. So they have to be clinical, and set plays could be the way to do that. Oh, there's actually one more name as well that I thought about. And this is a brilliant story. You know, so often we can get swept along in football and everything on the pitch, and we can forget about the bigger picture. And Larissa Krummer, just what an amazing story. You know, not just battling to get into the team and battling to get into the knockouts. She was battling to walk again. And to be there now, I mean, I don't know if you guys have spoken about her like before, maybe you have, but I was so moved by that story. You know, going from playing at the top level internationally to having injuries reminiscent of, you know, of a motorcycle accident, I think a surgeon said to her, and to get back to this level again, you know, that takes a sheer amount of grit. That was a story that caught my eye, but also this is a huge moment for my fellow Englishman, Martin Ho, who took a very big gamble of going across the North Sea to leave his position as number 2 at Manchester United and to go himself. And I was reading in the Norwegian press a lot of comments from his players. This was a recent article. A lot of comments from his players about how he's instilled this kind of new culture in them and the connect between the playing staff. And you can see the mutual respect that's ongoing between them all. Not sure how his Norwegian is holding up. He said he had trouble with the language barrier, but it's probably better than mine. So those, I think, could be some protagonists to look out for. Yeah, and ones that caught my eye, certainly.
I'll say the folks who have been kind enough to give us feedback and have enjoyed the show, especially because we latched on to Brann early, love their style of play. Just the most polite people you could find on the internet. I think in one of the first shows when we talked about Brann, I said, I apologize if I'm butchering these names. A guy left a really nice comment. I said, hey, man, how do we do on the pronunciations? He said, you got everything wrong, but that's okay. We didn't expect it to be right. And the dude, his name is Per. Shout out to you, Per. We appreciate you, man. But yeah, they will give you grace, if anything.
That's always good to know. Because I think sometimes, and women's football can fall foul of this as well, it can be a bit vitriolic at times. And I think it's good to know that there's a balance, and you know, we've got to all hold each other up here. Especially as women's football continues to grow, there are people like yourselves who put a lot of work into forwarding the game. And look, especially if you hear a presenter or a commentator getting the name wrong, sometimes it's from pure laziness and people don't learn. And I think that's something that everyone should do better on. However, sometimes you can learn a name, and then you can still get it wrong. I interviewed Vincent Kompany, the former Manchester City player, at the weekend, and I asked him at the start of the interview, do you prefer Vincent or Vincent? He said Vincent. What did I call him at the end of the same interview? Vincent. So sometimes it is an innocent mistake and a slip, and it is really helpful for me as an English speaker when native speakers. I've had a lot of Dutch people help me out this year on Jackie Groenen, which I believe is nearer to not butchering it. But yeah, like a big respect to people who help out with pronunciations and you know, lead you the way rather than castigating you for getting it wrong. It's really, really appreciated.
That's fair, for sure. Yeah, let's definitely build together. All right, Cam, so we're going to get you out of here on this question. Pure hypothetical, that we're not making any predictions here, but let's just say that Brann finds a way to win on Wednesday. I'm interested to hear, obviously, I think we know what that would do for Brann and you know, that whole organization. What could a Barcelona loss, you know, obviously as unlikely as it is, would you expect, you know, that to maybe be a turning point in the wrong direction, or do you think that would maybe operate as more of a wake up call for them?
It's a really good question, you know, because Categorically, that is a failure for Barcelona not to get to. No, I think not to get to the final is a failure for Barcelona this year. Anything can happen over 90 minutes, but I think they have to get there at least. So what happens if they go out? Okay, firstly for Brann, that is like you say, it is massive, and I think against Ajax or Chelsea. I think Chelsea will have the measure of Ajax if it goes to form over the 2 legs. But if you can beat Barcelona, you can beat anyone. And they don't fear anyone anyway. They're already punching way above their weight. But what that does to Barcelona, I mean, they're still going to win the league, I think, barring a massive catastrophe. Okay, I cannot see a world where that doesn't happen. They've already won the Super Cup. Okay, it's 90 minutes in the Copa del Reina final against Real Sociedad. Maybe the same could happen. I don't think. Results-wise, I don't think it affects them massively because they still win 3 trophies out of 4. However, it's such a strange concept seeing them out at the quarterfinals. It's one that it's hard to imagine. But then again, it is already a turning point because Jonathan Heraldes is moving on. It's a change of era. The key players still to tie down to new contracts. We're still waiting to see whether Alexia Putellas is going to renew her deal. That's been a talking point for a long, long time now. Mariona Caldente as well. That's said to be near, but they're still ongoing. I think that's a big risk for Barcelona if they lost before they were wrapped up. Maybe that's when it spells the end of an era. But I think it already is really. So wow. I don't think it's as monumental as it could have been had Jonathan Heraldes already been leaving. What it would do is leave us with a wide open competition. I don't know if it'll happen, but no, I think because we are already in a transitory period, I don't see it having this cataclysmic effect on their fortunes.
Interesting. Very, very cool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there anything else that we failed to cover? What did we miss here, Cam?
I think we've covered a lot of bases, but I as a commentator can't make predictions. I'm there to call the action, react to it. You guys can make predictions, so I'm going to turn it around on you guys if that's okay. And I just wonder purely, how do you see it? How do you see it building?
We did a proper preview last night that should be running here in the next day or so, definitely before kickoff. And I think my honest prediction is in this opening match, Brann keeps it close. Whether that's within 1, within 2, I definitely have the feeling they're going to be in striking distance. I feel like the weather, sort of treacherous environment, Bronn's physicality, Barcelona in a little bit of flux. We've seen a lot of lineup changes for various reasons. Defensively, you already hit on that point pretty brilliantly. I think this one is close, so I think you're going to get yourself an entertaining match that hopefully you could be 100% locked in, engaged in, full 90 plus. Grant, what do you think?
Yeah, we pretty much agreed on that. And you had mentioned it earlier, Kim, just like Brann keeping it within 1. I feel like that feels close to a win for Brann. And, like you said, they're not afraid of anybody. And one thing, we have alluded to it with the weather, when it's cold and you get hit, those elbows feel a little sharper. The ground hurts a little more. You talk about the artificial surface. Something tells me Brann might be coming in there with a bit of a physical mindset as well.
We get that on a smaller level playing in England at winter, and those even when the ball strikes you in an odd place, it's horrible, isn't it? So I'll be keeping an eye out for that. That's a really good point that I hadn't thought about. But guys, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you for coming on. And since you guys have alerted me to your presence, I've really enjoyed listening to the show, and I hope you really enjoy the games.
To you as well. We appreciate you, Cam.
Thanks for coming by, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, guys. Cheers.
Cheers.